Test, test. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everybody to tonight's regular planning meeting for May 20th, 2025. I'd like to thank everybody here in attendance. I'd like to go ahead and call to order and determine a roll call, please.
John Giuliani.
Rick Krause.
Dan Ferris.
Ted Tozer.
Pallavi Kardare.
Trey Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to go ahead and move down to approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any amendments to this evening's agenda? Seeing no one, I'd like to go ahead and then make a motion to adopt tonight's agenda as presented.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Majority has that. Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and move on to minutes for correction and approval. We have two this evening. We have March 18th and April 14th for approval and or corrections. Anybody have any corrections or notations that they'd like to make? Awesome. I'd like to go ahead and without objection, I'd like to go ahead and move to approve March 18th, 2025 and April 14th, 2025's planning board meeting minutes.
So moved.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Do we need a second? Thank you.
Oh, very good.
No, your second is not required.
Just thank you, Barbie. I'd like to go ahead and open it up this evening for general public comment.
Was there a vote on the motion?
I believe
Was it all in favor?
Unanimous. Thank you, Barbie. I would like to, anybody have any objections? Just double checking. Okay, thank you. I'd like to go ahead and open it up for general public comments, and I would like to just go ahead because I know there is a possibility of online submissions. Is there any submitted questions?
No.
No. I'd like to go ahead and then close general public comments. And moving on to item E, old business. This evening we have our town clerk, Barbie Bruce, to present and discuss our planning board rules of procedure. Barbie, would you join us at the podium, please? Thank you.
Not my mic. Perfect. Good evening, board. Before you have comments from some board members that have provided their comments for the rules. You also have a copy of the 2021 minutes there, and I've provided a revised copy of the draft meeting minutes. Basically, what the new draft has is it addresses the comment that Chair Ferris had concern with about the BOA. So we have included in 1-2 a sentence for the Board of Adjustments and how that functions. There has also been a concern about the Waxhaw 2-term limits. And we understand of the continuity on the board, which is very understandable. So what I would like for you all to consider is maybe possibly providing an ex officio type seat, where for the scenario would be if, say, you had new elections and Chair Ferris and Vice Chair LeMay were not elected for that and someone else was, then they would serve as the ex officios for that year to help the new chair and vice chair transition into that role. This will continue that continuity because the ex officio seats would help with the training of the new chair and the new vice chair if that occurred. So I would recommend that you maybe put in something in your rules of procedure that addresses that so that we know that there will be ex officios if that election was different from year to year. And that takes care of that where you roll off for a year and then you stay off for a year, but you're still an ex officio. And then if you're reelected for the following year, for a new year, then it all transfers back and forth.
So then, just to clarify, then one of my points was to make sure that we had clarity on if there was a year break, a board member, whether it was myself or Ms. LeMay or any other board member that holding an executive position, that year break, then they could be reelected to a vice chair if they had been chair or after a year break, or are they?
Correct. Keep in mind, remember that your terms are for 3 years.
Yes.
And so if you're elected in that first year term as chair, you're not technically off of the board. You just roll off of that position, but you're still a board member. So if you were rolling off, let's say, Chair Ferris, if you were rolling off for the year, you would become that ex officio, but you would still be a planning board member until your term expires.
Okay.
So the terms don't follow the seat position. Your terms as planning boards, it follows you as a member, not just the chair and vice chair. That's just a function within the board that you have, and you oversee the proceedings of the meetings.
Yes, ma'am. Then one of my other questions would be if the vice chair and the chair, to make sure that it's clear that they're two different executor seats. So the vice chair could be elevated to chair without having to take the year break?
Correct.
Okay, and that's where I just wanted to make sure, and one of my comments is I wanted to make sure that that was clear. It kind of left it a little open for interpretation depending on readings. And I just wanted to make sure that that point was clear, that they were two separate executors, essentially, and that the vice chair could be elevated to chair.
But that same year follows that chair and vice chair. So
yes,
technically, that vice chair would still roll off the same year that the chair does if that vice chair position had not been reelected.
okay.
Is that? Are you am I understanding your question? Am I providing the right answer?
So if they
I
had,
think
So let's back up.
scenario
Let's
is,
if they
Okay,
had served
so-
two terms as vice chair,
Yeah.
and then the vice chair, it becomes an elected chair,
In
but
the
they had
third
already
year.
served as two as an executor as vice chair. Can they be elevated, or do they have to take that year break because they were on the executor committee, or the chair and vice chair?
They would still take that year break
Okay.
until it's time for them to come back on.
Okay.
But they would technically not be off. They would be an ex officio
Got it.
seat. So they would use that year in the ex officio seat as that transition period where you would generally, if you didn't have an ex officio seat, then they would roll off for the year and just become the planning board member.
Yes.
While someone else serves in that seat.
Okay.
And then they would be eligible to either be elected as chair or back to vice chair if they choose. But that's the beauty of the ex officio seat, is they technically don't really completely roll off for a year in that seat, but they're providing that continuity to a new chair or a new vice chair.
Sure. Okay.
Is that clarified?
I think that kind
Does
of
everybody
works
understand
for
that?
me, and I think that was more of what I was curious about. Is are we looking at it as essentially individual seats, or as essentially an executive body, and they have to roll off? And that's what I just wanted to clarify.
No, you're correct. They are two separate seats, but with the ex officio seats, then you generally don't roll off. You're just providing that support to the new.
Okay, and then the new chair and vice chair would assume the duties of like an OAB.
Correct.
And then we or the ex officio, in that case, any case, we could be a support element. So if the chair said, "Hey, you guys did the OAB last year, and we're just get going. Would you team up with us and kind of thing? And can we partner up to help address the OAB? It's a new process for us. We can, as an ex officio, we can work together and counsel and advise to the best of our ability, along with staff."
Correct. And when that time comes, then you would also help the new chair during that OAB function to, do the interviews and vet the candidates just like any other member would.
I don't understand. I'm sorry, I wasn't recognized.
Thank you. I'd like to go ahead and recognize you.
Yeah, thank you. I don't understand the difference between being an ex officio official and just being a board member that has experience and is able to help and advise. I don't understand what the distinction is between a regular board member who used to be a chair and an ex officio chair.
The ex officio is in many on many boards, they will have someone that transitions off. So they become the ex officio seat to help with the new transition. Granted, it can be a board member, but this kind of gives you the continuity in case that board member happens to be also new. So it gives the continuity to the board and to the chair and vice chair seats so that they can give them the support to help them manage and oversee the meetings.
Does the ex officio designation carry with it any sort of responsibility or authority laid out in the rules of procedures that's distinctive from any other board member?
No, they would just serve as during that transition period to the chair and the vice chair.
It's just a sort of way to formalize the planning board's expectation that a former chair has an informal obligation to serve as a mentor to a new chair, and same for an ex officio vice chair. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It just solidifies them, I believe, as, for lack of better words, a special advisor.
Correct. If you want to call it that, yeah. Okay. Anything else on that?
Thank you for your work on that, Barbie.
Oh,
And
you're welcome.
I appreciate the work that I'm sure Cindy did as well on coming up with the ex officio and the entire staff. So appreciate you working with us to hear some of our concerns and as we work through this and finding a very positive solution in how to work and make sure that there is some continuity in the future, because I believe that it's going to be important moving forward in the near years, is to one, bring in new talent, and then to retain the talent we do have on this board.
Correct. And that's one of the beauties of having this board, is that you have the continuity to be able to pass on to the other members so that everything is seamless and there's not a lot of time to get people up to speed. It's just kind of a seamless transition, and it's more effective for you guys to be able to do it that way. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Before I'm still getting.
Go ahead, Rick. Thank you.
As written, I'm having trouble understanding, if I understood your comment, that a person couldn't be vice chair for 2 consecutive one-year terms and then immediately become chair that would violate this rule. But I don't read it that way. It seems very clear that those two positions are not synchronized, and therefore one could serve 2 years as a vice chair followed by 2 years as a chair without violating the rule. Which I'm comfortable with, but that's not how you described it, so we may need to change the language to be clearer if the intent is as you described it.
So annually, you select, or you, by motion, you elect a chair and vice chair every year. So it's the same position throughout that year.
Mm-hmm.
So if the chair and vice chair are elected for another 2 consecutive years, the same 2, then after that second year, both would have to roll off for a year, which means they would transition as an ex officio.
They would have to roll off.
But what I'm trying to tell you is, this is not part of the rules. This is only a consideration. So this section would need to be revised in order to clarify what the ex officio members are doing, so that you understand that they do roll off a year for that. It's not that they're rolling off of the planning board for a year. They're just rolling off of that seat for a year. They're transitioning to an ex officio seat, and they're providing that transition and that continuity to the new chair and vice chair. So just keep in mind that annually you do that.
I think the question he's asking is, at the end of 2 years of consecutive time, could the vice chair become chairman?
Not until they roll off for that year.
Okay.
Like I'm saying, the language is not in here. That's just a consideration based on a comment from Chair Ferris. So
Wants to hear is we need the understanding that if you serve as a vice chair for 2 consecutive years, it does preclude you from becoming the chair in that 3rd year.
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So, with
It's
that
already
being said,
it's already implied in your rules.
it's implied in the
Based on
rules.
here. It's
Do you need it to be more clear?
Well, I would have 2 comments, thank you. I would propose changing it so that we did allow a person to be a vice chair for 2 years and then be elevated to chair. That sounds like a pretty good approach to ensuring that you have a decent succession plan.
But that
So I
wouldn't
like that.
occur if you have elections.
That would, I'm sorry.
The only way that could occur is if that vice chair agreed to serve as a chair and you elected that person to be the chair.
Absolutely.
That would be the only way that would occur.
Yeah.
They wouldn't automatically roll into that chair position
No, nothing
because they're
automatic.
vice chair.
I completely agree with that, and that's clear in the language. So with the clarification that what this language seems to suggest is in agreement with what you just said, which is if an individual has been elected 2 years in a row as vice chair and then is immediately elected to be chair in the 3rd year, that's okay. That's election. That's not some kind of automatic rolling into a position. If I understood you correctly, that would be okay, and that's good. I like that. So as long as we all agree as to the terminology.
So just keep in mind, while they're serving in that ex officio role, they're in that year that they've rolled off. They're just serving
Understood.
in that capacity. So yes, once they're finished with that year, then that vice chair could be elected to chair, but that's only through motion
So it
and election.
It sounds like we're saying there's a choice here. If we adopt this notion of ex officio, then we also are adopting the notion of an ex officio not being able to be elected to a different officer position. It sounds like it's an either or, in which case I would be disposed not to go with the ex officio and simply to clarify, as you did, Daniel, and as you did, John, clarify that it is that these two positions are limited individually, not,
Yes.
so that we could allow someone to be vice chair for 2 years in a row and then to be elected chair for 2 years in a row.
So I hear what you're saying, and I actually agree with about 92, 98%, something like that. I hear what you're saying. I just want to make sure. So I'll just use myself as an example, just to make sure that we're all. I served 2 years. I roll off. On that third year, I roll off. The board says, hey, Chair Ferris, we want you as vice chair. I would be barred from vice chair on that third year.
On the third year, yes.
But I would say not as currently in our rules of procedures, only as your.
That's actually using your example. And so using your example, because you, like we were trying to say, are they separated as separate executors, essentially?
Yeah.
And I have no problem with the framework of that. I just know then what their concern is Vice Chair Ferris served 2 years, gets elevated third year to, or nominated as chair. Sounds like based off of the current structure of the rules, it would also bar the vice chair from being elevated to chair.
Correct.
But we can adjust our rules and just direct staff to kind of maybe see if that is a possibility. And I know that the ex officio might cover based off of what staff is saying, but that the in-between of continuity. But it sounds like Rick wants to be able to elevate the vice chair to chair on that third year. And so it sounds like that's what he's wanting. I'm not sure if having two sets of rules is something that can be, in the logistics industry, you want to make something repeatable. And is it easy to understand and a repeatable process without much laboriousness, kind of, you don't want to make it an arduous process.
Mm-hmm.
So, so either we have term limits, and I don't mind term limits, or it sounds like we let the election process play out with no term limits.
Well, or you get the third option that he's talking about is you have term limits, but the term limits are just for that particular position, not for all the positions.
Yes, or you separate the chair and vice chair, like that. What I was asking Barbie is, can that chair, vice chair later be elevated in that third year?
Right, she said, well, what's written now, no.
Yes.
But I think what he's asking is, can we separate the two? So that's the third option.
And that was I think I had laid out those three possibilities, or I had also laid out a 3/4 vote could override essentially that. So essentially 5 out of 7 votes could say, hey, we want our vice chair to become chair. And that's just part of the election process.
That's correct.
So we got a couple of options. I'm open to any of it. I actually support the term limits. I understand that having some movement on the board also is healthy, to have other executors and other members be able to join as chair or vice chair. So I have no problems. I'll leave it up to you all. But it sounds like we've got a few options on the table to codify and clarify.
I'll just say I liked Ted's language, if you can remember how you said it, which I think was term limits individually on each of the.
Well, all I said was there's term limits on the chairman and vice chairman. That's it. I mean, the idea, but they're independent of each other. So if you're a chairman, want to become vice chairman, you become vice chairman. I mean, the idea, but you're limited in those particular positions. But they're separated. I mean, again, I know you can always worry about the vice chairman, chairman passing back and forth for the two, and that's the I guess the downside. But I think that's where the question is: how important is it? Because I think what's really great is we're in a situation where you're still going to be on the board, so you're still going to have the influence of the people that are there. So not like you're disappearing completely. Just like the ex officio officer, and how important that is, because the old chairman's still going to be on the board. So, I mean, this whole concept, I guess, is just, I'm open to really anything from my perspective, because even what's in here now, but again, this idea of ex officio officer, I'm just kind of curious what that gets, because the person's going to be here anyway, so, versus codifying that they're the ex officio officer.
I guess it identifies, if a planning board member or new planning board member, hey, this is your ex officio. If he's a backup, if you also need to have an idea or who to ask and staff, and it's just another option. Again, special advisor and another resource tool in the toolbox.
But also keep in mind that if you have an ex officio chair and vice chair, and you have one of your vice chairs out, then that ex officio could serve in that capacity. Or if you have a chair, the ex officio chair could serve in place of the new chair if they're absent for that meeting. Generally, that proceeding goes over to the vice chair because they have the same duties as the chair and presiding over meetings. So it gives the opportunities for the vice chair to do that. Just keep in mind that the term limits are consecutive. You have your elections every year. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the same person will be elected to that seat. It only means as if that person is elected for 2 consecutive terms as that seat. They are separate, and each one of them carries the same term limit, regardless on how you're reading this. It still reads that way.
Sure.
But it gives the 2 people that need to roll off after they've served that 2 consecutive term, if they serve that, gives those 2 people an opportunity to stay engaged in that position while they're in that 1-year transition period for that seat, if they in fact want to do the seat again after their year is up. That's all that is. So if you want to do that, then we can draft the language for that. If you don't, then we'll leave the election part the way it is. That just gives that person, those 2 people, an opportunity to serve for that continuity for the 2 new chair and vice chair. That's all that's for.
Barbie, this doesn't change if someone's 3-year board membership term is after their 3rd year, and then they get reappointed to the board.
Correct.
It doesn't change anything,
No.
right? So the 2 consecutive years, that's all in play still and all that stuff.
No, that's just the seat that you all elect as members.
Okay.
That has nothing to do with the appointments or your term appointment. That has nothing to do with any of that.
Okay.
So it's just how the seats of the chair and the vice chair. That's it. So I gave you something to think about, right?
Yes, you did. I'm fine, and I think it's the first time I've ever heard of an ex officio. So forgive me, I was digesting it on the fly. But I think I understand what you all have intended to accomplish with that position. I know for me, it sounds like I'm okay with it as written currently by staff. The only thing I would recommend in this, this is the middle ground, I think, to what you're aiming for is, would you all think about, hey, the 2/3 vote can essentially nullify for the vice chair or chair, so it's even across the board. It could waive the term limit for 1 year.
I don't understand the 2/3 vote. What do
So
you mean?
that would mean you would have to have 5 of 7, I believe, of the board votes to say, yeah, we want you to serve the 1 additional or that 3rd term. But then I think that having maybe a hard stop that where you would have to roll off, so that vice chair could be elevated with a 2/3 vote or 5 out of 7 to chair. And that's a way to have the rule remain in place the way the staff is presented, but the board during the election process can say, you know what, we really want that vice chair to be elevated.
And that's strictly up to you guys. I mean, during that portion of the elections, If you would like to nominate your vice chair as the chair, that's strictly up to you. And if that vice chair is willing to sit in that seat, then that's your pleasure as a planning board to do that. So
It just codifies
this is
it.
just remember, these are just guidelines in which for you to operate. If you want to change those by any means, then we can draft it like that. But this doesn't change anything based on how you're operating now.
Let's go ahead and maybe keep moving forward to see if there's any additional questions at this time. I think we've kind of figured out what we might need to do. I'm going to leave it to my other members to if they have any questions or comments on those specifics. So anybody else? Are we okay? Keep moving forward with Barbie? Thank you.
And basically it's the comments that you had, Chair Ferris, and some of those I've already redlined those in red. And if you have any questions based on that, then we can go over those. I think the other concern was
Quasi-judicial. That was just, and
Yes,
you've already addressed
yes,
that. That was, and I appreciate that. That was my only
Yes.
other thing that I was like, hey, I want to make sure that this one was clear.
right, because when you operate as the BOA, you are in a quasi-judicial proceeding. So then you have another set of guidelines and rules that you have to adhere to based on your 160D. And so because you're, as a quasi-judicial board, you are in the evidentiary proceeding where you're hearing witnesses, evidence, and things just like you were in a courtroom. So we don't generally put any of that in your rules of procedure as a planning board because that's a totally separate proceeding for you.
And then formalization of public comment, I'm perfectly fine with what staff's recommended statement is.
Right, and currently, right now, you already have a public comment period. You offer a general comment period at the start of your meeting. It's part of your agenda.
I just didn't know if we needed to formalize that in our rules of procedures.
No,
Okay.
no, because there's no statutory requirement for you to hold public comment, but you do for out of consideration of the public that is here or what they want to give comment on some of the land use items that you may have.
Perfect. And then the last one was just something that I thought would be helpful for our town clerk and staff, and if someone needed to be designated, just kind of formalizing that port. Right?
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and from time to time, we'll designate. Usually my deputy clerk will fill in if I'm not able to, so we're getting her up to speed with that. But it's, it's a pleasure to serve you as a member of your board, so I'm able to do that.
Thank you.
I also wanted to point out from let's see if I can find that now. Okay, if you, in part 13 where you have your motions, I believe there was a little bit of confusion to 13.4 where it says majority vote. So what majority vote means is just a vote of the members that are present. And if you're not here, then you can't vote. However, if you are here and you leave and don't get excused, then that is an automatic affirmative vote. So majority vote is just the members that are present at the time that vote occurred. So we have also put in after the rules or as set forth in state law. So if it's required by state law, then we have to follow the motions based on the state law. And we struck the a concurrent vote of the 4/5 majority shall be required for a variance. That is only when you are serving as a BOA. So we feel that that was a little bit confusing in that area, so we struck that language from that. And I believe that was, and I think Ted had a question about
6-8.
members and discussing pending cases. As you know, we've talked about that where it's a quorum if the majority of you are meeting in a public place and you're discussing an upcoming case. So you've created an unofficial meeting. However, there's nothing wrong with you all meeting or having a social time with 2 of yours or 3. But we would rather you refrain from any talking of any pending plans that might be coming through, simply because it could cause bias and you could be recused from the vote because of your previous conversations, because you're not impartial to that particular information.
Yeah, the point I was making is under section 6-8, you said a lot more than 6-8. 6-8 simply says prior to a planning board meeting, members are permitted to discuss pending cases, but you refrain from responding with opinions and views. Well, if you're talking about pending cases, I assume you're going to have opinions and responses. So to me, this seems like the warnings you just gave now should be part of 6-8 if you're going to meet to talk about a pending case.
Correct. That is there to let you understand what that means as far as meetings. That's not to say that we're saying, yes, you can do that, you can meet, but what that's saying is it's addressing what you need to do as far as meetings and how you address that. We're not saying that you can do that. That's not what that's saying there at all.
Okay, it sure sounds like you're saying that, because it's prior to a planning board meeting, members are permitted to discuss pending. That sounds like you're giving a green light to do it. We're saying it's permitted to discuss pending cases. Again, that's the only confusion I'm having is you're saying it's permitted to discuss things outside the meeting. And that's when I guess I'm thinking is there should be some cautionary comment saying if you do discuss it, these are things you need to be aware of. But maybe, again, that was, or maybe you don't even put that section at all. But by saying you're permitted to meet outside the meeting to discuss cases, it seems like you're opening up an opportunity, like you said, to have to recuse yourself from these other issues if you don't handle it properly. That was the only point we're trying to make.
Well, Ted, the one thing that's missing out of that sentence is facts. So you can discuss the facts of a case, but if you start getting into conjecture and opinions and views, that's where it turns. I think that's kind of like implied in this.
And that's addressed in
language.
your conflict of interest, because the overall is that you have a pending case. You all can discuss that amongst yourselves, but it should only be what you're discussing and not factual things. It's not something that you speak among other folks. It's just planning board members. Cindy, you want to help me on that?
I'm going to just jump in here for a minute.
Please.
Planning board members can meet with the public. If a developer calls you and says, "Can you meet with me? I'd like to talk with you about this." Sure, you can do that. You should refrain from doing that as a board, though. A majority of you should not do that. Meet with a developer or a citizen, and 2x2, 3x3, so that you don't have a majority meeting. But certainly part of your duty, I think, as a planning board is to gather facts about the case, and it is to be available to talk with citizens or with developers about a case. So I think that is what I've experienced through my entire career, that a planning board, it may meet with developers, may meet with citizens if you want to. If you don't want to, then That's certainly up to you.
Then I guess I would recommend changing the policy, simply saying that they can meet with non-members to discuss the case, or non-members of the board.
Yes, you can.
Versus saying they're permitted to meet to talk about the case.
You can do that, and I would recommend, however, that when you're meeting with a citizen, a neighbor, a developer, that you don't commit to anything, that you just gather facts.
Right, so I'm just talking about this.
Information.
I'm just talking about this procedure. The procedure, I think what you're saying is a procedure shouldn't say simply meet prior to, or meeting. You should simply say that you can meet prior with non-board members to gather information or something like that, to clarify who you're meeting with, that you're allowed to prior to a meeting. Because it seems like a meeting with other members of the board, it gets really sticky really quick.
So I think I hear there, it sounds like we need to add a couple of words, just in my opinion. It sounds like John is correct to discuss facts, not opinions of a possible case. So, hey, Cindy, I need to talk to you about setbacks for NC on this area. You know, how does this work if I had a citizen ask me for additional screening? I know that there's no additional screening like distance-wise, but is there planting-wise that we could address to help that citizen? The citizen is John Doe, and then can I connect them with the staff members? And that's kind of discussing a case, but you're not discussing or inviting your opinion. You're just discussing some of the facts of the case, but you're not in diving into your conjecture.
Well,
And I would also like to point out that if it's quasi-judicial, you should not be discussing the case at all.
And I was going to say,
you know that.
But yeah, I was going to say, so
Yeah.
there's and then the BOA is completely different.
Yeah.
It is like you are essentially a judiciary, and you hear the facts almost as if they were sworn in at the podium, and you only hear the facts presented on that evening. If I'm
You're correct.
okay, thank you. And so I think it sounds like if we added those couple of words, possibly it could clarify.
Look, I wasn't disagreeing with the language that Barbie had.
Okay.
What I was saying is, it's actually implied in here that you're to stick to the facts, since you're not to, in the language, it says you're not to respond with opinions or views. So I'm okay with the language,
Yeah,
Barbie.
I think so too. I think it's fine.
What I'm hearing though, was there confusion on like a quorum type of language that needs to be in 6.8? Because it's addressed somewhere else though, correct?
Yeah, but
Correct.
not the informal meetings. Like we used to warn people that they're drawing the line. When you get something I'm saying,
Well, but Ted, I think, I don't mean to interrupt, but I heard what your concerns were, and what you're talking about is a quorum discussing opinions, or I'm sorry, a quorum of members are permitted to discuss a pending case, which it doesn't say here. I mean, maybe it could be clarified, but it's in general. What, to Cindy's point, was as an individual member, as a 2x2 or as a 3x3, you could discuss facts of a case with a developer or a citizen outside of a quorum, outside of a meeting. That's okay. And maybe it was there confusion there.
oh, no. The only confusion I have is it's not that specific. It simply says that you can get together to discuss the case as long as you give opinions.
Okay.
And my concern is that if you're meeting somewhere and people see you meeting,
As a quorum.
no, again, but this doesn't say it's not a quorum.
But that's what I'm getting at. That's your concern. So
if we want to add that, it sounds like
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
that's the part B, is adding, member. Let me see if I can do this real fast. Prior to the planning board meeting, members absent a quorum are permitted to discuss pending cases and facts, but should refrain from responding with opinions.
Right, because that's all I'm talking about is drawing on that state line. Where
Yeah, that's what I figured the
And
confusion was.
and I think if we added that or slightly adjusted that language, if anybody has any additional or other recommendations, it sounds like that we can clarify that.
I'm okay with what you said.
If we added language, I just jotted down something. Planning board members should be aware of open meeting requirements when meeting outside of the planning board meeting. Something along those lines.
Yeah, something along, prior to the planning board meeting, members are permitted, absent a quorum, so just reinforcing, or absent a quorum, to discuss pending cases, but should only respond with facts and refrain from responding with opinions.
And
So
if
it
you
wouldn't
word
be
it that way,
quorum, it would be
Cindy-
majority. So
Yeah.
it would be.
So, yeah, it would be, so
a
2 by 2,
majority.
3 by 3,
Yeah.
Same thing if the BOC had 2 by 2s with the town manager. That's not a quorum.
That's not a majority.
And it's not a majority, and so
Yeah.
you are not breaking 160D.
Right.
You are permitted to have essentially civil conversation and with any members and have a lunch.
For the benefit of future members coming in and not having to go through all that again, I think the added language would be okay.
Staff okay with that? Cindy, are you okay with that?
Could Barbie and I work on that language and
I would,
send something out to you?
Sure.
Or let me defer to you on that, because did you want to get this voted on tonight?
No, it's not necessary to do it tonight. We can draft that and send it back out.
I'm okay with that as well.
Okay. So if there's no other comments, then I have concluded my review of these rules of procedures.
I'll open it up to my other planning board members. Rick, thank you.
Yeah, I had some other comments. I think that you feel like they may be addressed, and I just need to be instructed on how they are already addressed, or that I misinterpreted or misread. So probably the most substantive comment I had that we haven't discussed was the possibility of adding a mechanism for the planning board to vacate the appointment of a chair or vice chair. So we elect them to a one-year term, that's normal, but if for whatever reason the planning board wishes to remove a chair or vice chair, I propose that should be allowed. Just in terms of symmetry, the board elects, and the board holds accountable those whom they elect to those positions. So are you saying it's already allowed?
Yes,
And
that's
that's why-
already a mechanism in your rules of procedure, because if you, in fact, as a board, remove a member, that is a written notice to the BOC, because the BOC is the board that appoints you. So if you are asking for removal of a member, regardless on what position they hold, then that's already in these rules of procedure.
So that's a little different.
So if it happens to be, let's just say, a chair or vice chair, then you will hold the same elections that you did when you elected that chair or vice chair to fill out the remainder of that term of that chair. So that mechanism is already there.
There would be 2 votes. It would be a vote to vacate and then a vote to appoint, correct?
Yes, yes.
And what my request was shy of that, actually. What you're describing, I believe, is that there's already a mechanism for removing a planning board member, regardless of what position they may or may not have as chair or vice chair. I'm saying I don't necessarily want the board to be able to eject a member of the board, because the board doesn't appoint members of the board. But the board does elect those officers, and it seems to me the board should be able to vacate the elections of those officers without removing them from the planning board. So they remove them from the office, but not from the planning board. It sounds like that may not be addressed, and I may be the only one that wants that, but that was my feedback. Did you follow what I'm saying, Bart?
Yes.
So just to summarize, it sounds like you want the ability in the rules of procedures to be able to vacate or strip an elected officer from his executor position, but it would not essentially, it would be a step.
It would not strip him from the planning board.
And it would not strip him or make it a written notice to the BOC, which then they would I'm sure that they would ask questions regardless of wondering why someone would got elected and then stripped X amount of months a year because it's only 12 months in a year,
Right.
and then I mean, I'll be.
I like it from a symmetry and an accountability standpoint. The board, the planning board elects its own chair and vice chair. The planning board should be able, in my head.
I think that's pretty McGiven. I'll be honest with you. Democratic process. If all of a sudden 6 members didn't like me, I'm just picking myself because I'm an easy target. I'll just pick on me. If 6 members didn't like me and you all said, "Hey, Dan, you're out. We don't want you as chair anymore," what am I going to say? Like, nah, you elected me, and I'm going to just sit here and just,
Well, that's what
be a
the
lame
rules-
duck? I'm just going to push back here, Rick, and I'm just going to say, as a resident, I'm going to do common sense thing, and I'm going to use my logic, and I'm going to say, maybe I'm not being helpful to my other residents at that point, or I might just excuse myself because I'm just a volunteer. I'm not holding high office.
Yeah.
So if you really want something, I'm okay with it. I hear what you're saying. I get you want some additional authorities to be able to tug and pull. I'll leave it up to y'all.
You're looking for extra checks and balances, and
I think it's already there.
I agree. I think a 1-year term is not that long. It does make people get to know their fellow board members and not just blindly vote for them originally as chair and vice chair. I think as responsible adults that want to be productive members of the board, servants of the community, we owe that to the board of commissioners. We owe that to each other, the citizens, to get to know each other and actually put a thoughtful vote forward when we're originally voting for the chair and vice chair.
We're just good neighbors.
Yeah, I've served on a board in this town for getting on over 10 years, and I'm not aware of any board in this town or any other board I've been on where you've had that. I think if the issue is bad enough, they need to be removed from the board in general, and then we have a mechanism for that.
I'm good with that. I think it's good, and it's pretty much implied at this point, in my personal opinion. I'm good with the language as stands, presented by staff.
All right, then we will draft 6-8 to your suggestions, and we'll make them available to the board, and then you can adopt these at your next meeting, and then they'll need to go to the BOC for ratification.
Cindy, since we're continuing this to another, do I have to make any motions, or do I have to make any requests to continue this to the next planning board meeting or upon staff?
I think it would be in your best interest to just make a motion to continue this item to the next planning board meeting.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to go ahead and move forward to continue this item to the next planning board meeting.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
All right, so the next thing, do we have a copy of the meeting?
In the back of our packet, isn't it?
All right, one other thing I wanted to touch base with you guys. It's starting to be summertime and vacation, and I don't believe, wanted to go through and make sure the dates that you all have, it's in your packet. It's this piece of paper right here. Yes. Thank you, Joe. It's probably on your screen now. If you'll just take a quick glance at these dates and see if they are still meets with your schedule, or if you have some dates that you need to adjust so that we can make those revisions and get it before the BOC for them to readopt.
I won't be available for June and maybe July. I'm traveling outside country.
The only one that I'm looking at, and I don't have a calendar pulled up right in front of me, that October 21st, is that just a couple of days before a holiday?
No.
I don't have a holiday.
No, there's Veterans
for
Day.
October.
On a birthday, a lot of people think that's
I just couldn't remember off the top of my head.
Halloween's the 31st.
Yeah, I'm not worried about Halloween.
Thanks,
It's not a
Josh.
holiday. Not in my opinion.
Well, if that's a holiday, let's take
It's
that.
Diwali.
I just didn't know if there was I couldn't remember if there was like a federal holiday or something like that. Okay.
So, Pallava, is there any Indian holidays
Yes,
within those
Yes,
dates?
that's what I was
That's
checking.
my, maybe that's,
That's probably the holiday you're talking about.
thank you.
Let me just check.
I thought I had it in here.
They celebrate that on the weekend.
I don't know. Yeah. It's new to me, relatively new. Any other names?
You should celebrate that on the weekend.
Yeah, he's right. It's a holiday. It's a kind of Christmas for us. It's a Diwali. It's a festival
Okay.
of lights. It falls on October 20th. So, and it goes for 4 days. So October 21st.
So would you all want to either cancel that meeting or reschedule that for another day?
Could we direct staff to investigate if there's an availability for a possible special meeting on a reschedule and follow back up with this in the next June meeting? And I would recommend, if possible, out of respect for two of our members, I believe that would be taking that as a holiday, to just take a look at it. And then we can make maybe an ultimate decision in June.
That's fine.
Is that possible?
Yep, that's fine.
Could we get dates in October that would be available for a potential special meeting?
How about we follow up with you in June, and or our team would be happy to also email staff in the interim so we can try and work that out?
I tell you what, let's make it easy. You all look at your calendars and you have the dates and you email me with some possibility of dates to coincide here if you need to reschedule. Then what we'll do is we'll formulate another possible schedule for you all, and then we can determine the special meetings there. Because to hold a special meeting, I only need a 48-hour notice, and then the purpose of the special meeting.
Off the top of my head, why not just pick the 30th? But that's just kind of me off the top of my head. I normally do try and avoid end of months, though. That's just my normal business. But it goes to the 28th for your holiday.
No, it's
So-
just 4 days. So 28.
So the
The 20th,
28th
21st,
be-
22nd, and 23rd? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah, why don't we do
Okay.
28th?
So
Yeah,
maybe the
28th
28th would
be-
also be an option. That BOC. That's why I was I wasn't sure, and that's why I was wondering, could we maybe go after the
And?
BOC on that Thursday?
And?
If you reserve the room first, it's yours.
Oh yeah. Hey, I mean,
Do a double header.
yeah.
I'm okay with the 29th.
29th. So so it seems like there's a range maybe there right at the end. Maybe we sneak in before the BOC if our schedules couldn't sync on that Tuesday.
If you want to do the 29th, then we can add the
It's Wednesday,
29th
the
and
29th.
revise this, and that way we won't have to put a notice out.
Wednesday
This
the
serves as your
29th?
notice.
Yeah.
Wednesday the
I guess.
29th.
The
Yeah.
29th?
Yeah. And thank you, Daniel, for considering the holidays.
Is that okay with you?
Yeah, I think the October
I'm okay.
month we do
I can make the
elections and
29th
stuff
work as
too.
well. So I'm good with that.
Can everybody make the 29th?
You need a follow up? Okay. Yeah, then it sounds like Rick?
Yeah, it's fine for me. We only have one person absent, so we don't know that.
So in the rules of procedure, it says that the regular meetings, you have to hold them on the third Tuesday of each month at 6:30. So since we are changing that on the schedule, but not having a special meeting, could we add unless published otherwise to the end of that sentence?
Or is it just easier?
Well, that's what's on the notice. Unless otherwise noted, the Waxhaw Board of Planning Board holds regular monthly meetings on the third Tuesday of every month, beginning at 6:30.
So could we add that to the rules of procedure too, is what I'm asking?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we'll add that also.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Any other dates? November, December? You're good with December?
I will not be at the December meeting. Somebody turns 22.
Same here.
Yeah, I probably won't be at the December meeting. If we want to take a peek at that, let me see here.
My term is up, so I don't even know if I get a say, but I won't be
Yeah, I was
here
gonna
for the
say.
December vote either.
Okay.
Well, your term's
did-
not up yet, so you
Not
do
yet.
have a say.
Thank you.
If we
But
do
December, I
either
will
of
not be
that's-
present in December.
I would not, you can't slide that one back.
No, not back, forward.
I would do forward a week.
Well, there is an option to cancel the meeting entirely for the month.
Yeah.
December seems to be the busiest month for staff, members, board of commissioners. So that is an option.
Can we tentatively reschedule, but understanding that we might need to revisit with staff?
Or do you cancel
Well, you
it?
can
do we-
leave it
or
on
can we-
here, and if you choose to cancel the
Yeah.
meeting, then
Then
all
let's
that
just do
is
that.
just a
Then let's-
cancellation notice.
Just do
Yeah,
that.
then let's leave it as is,
Okay,
and then we would probably follow up with that part B.
Okay.
Unless we have to, and you need us for some reason.
all right, we'll make that correction for October, and we'll get a readoption by the board, and we'll send the revised schedule out to all the members.
Thank you. Thank you for working with us, staff, and all the planning board on that holiday.
Cool. All right, that's it for me.
Thank you, Barbie. We greatly appreciate it. With that, I'd like to go ahead and, do we need to close that discussion, Cindy, just in case? I'd like to go ahead and close that discussion for our meeting schedule, item F1. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Unanimous, thank you. With that, I'd like to go ahead and move on to new business number 2. This is a discussion of our planning board goals for 2025. This is just kind of an opening and a dialogue to see if there is any ideas floating out there. And I've been working with the Board of Commissioners and our planning staff, and on 6/24/25, I will be going in front of the BOC to give a leadership update. I did not get to attend the retreat this year with them, and that's normally when I get to have an open conversation. I was unfortunately not yet a back part of the team, and so there was kind of a lapse in that, and we're not able to join with typically what occurs in a conversation and a participation with the BOC during the retreat period. So this gives me an opportunity to have a conversation with them, see what they might be looking for some of their goals, and also giving a report back of maybe what we're seeing and updating our rules of procedures, letting them know that we're working on that and syncing up with them on those types of items, and if there's any other issues that we want to address.
You pretty much stole everything I was going to say. So we wanted to get a collective, I guess a collection of ideas from all of you about goals coming up for 2025, anything that you guys want to work on specifically. I know training has always been a big one, so just continuing that training and education, updating the rules of procedure, which are in progress. And then some of the other things have included having a planning speaker series, or could be learning more about the land development code and being more familiar with it, and just general things like that you think you guys would want to accomplish within this time frame of this year. And then Daniel is going to be bringing those ideas and kind of a perspective from the planning board to the Board of Commissioners. And so this was a directive directly from the mayor and asked that Daniel attend and give a leadership report. So as a whole, we just want to hear from you guys. What are some general goals that you would have? And I have examples from previous years as well, and then I have a draft one as well, which are just general ideas. Because I think in today's time, there seems to be a lot of legislative updates that are occurring at the state level, and so staff tries to stay well versed in that, but having you all and then having our Board of Commissioners be active in those new legislative goals that really affects some of our planning authority as a town, and then also at the county level too. So this is just a draft document of ideas or goals. They've varied depending on the year, depending on what we're working on. So one year is very heavy in the future land use plan and comp plan because we're in the midst of updating it. So we have fairly new ordinances, but you know, this is your time to really narrow your focus on goals that you guys have.
I'll bat lead off on this one. I know I've championed in the past training. I'm very appreciative of our training this year. That I gotta say, this was one of our most comprehensive trainings, and I'm very thankful for it. The other thing that I would like to champion and work with staff is, I know we're going through it right now, and having any additional knowledge on our historical preservation and partnering even with our historical preservation committee. Garnering any additional knowledge that will help us plan better for that area would be priceless, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, and since you bring up historic preservation, I know it's short notice, but we have a historic preservation workshop actually scheduled tomorrow. Our wonderful Janet Perano is giving a presentation on tax credits and our building exterior grants, African American History Project, and then also this may be interest to you guys as planning board members, but also as residents. We're kicking off a Waxhaw 250 committee to celebrate the 250th year signing of the Declaration of Independence. So that was an initiative that was brought to the county to get the county involved, to have a larger steering committee or just a committee on it. But there wasn't any interest. And so now Janet, I will say, I'm bragging, Janet took it upon herself to reach out to outside agencies like the Union County Library, our Downtown Waxhaw Association, UCPS, all these outside agencies to form a committee. And so I think that would be a great first step in getting involved in historic preservation, because it's at a greater level than that of just Waxhaw.
Janet, we essentially got a year for the 250 planning, or is it? Can you give me a small snapshot?
Sure. They actually started planning probably about 10 years ago at the federal level. And then about 2 years ago, the state started planning and asked for a county committee from each of the 100 counties. Union County has opted not to participate in that, so I felt that Waxhaw should step in and have a committee. There was enough interest in local community groups to wondering why Union County wasn't proceeding. So I reached out to those people and said, you know, we can do something here in Waxhaw. So we will, and they plan on continuing it through past July 4th of 2026. And I think the federal level, they want to go out to almost 2030, and it doesn't just focus on the signing of the Declaration of Independence, but that whole time period, the Revolutionary War, and it's focusing on people and places. So, you know, not just the founders of the country, but what was going on here locally. So that's why we are working with the Waxhaw the Museum of the Waxhaws, the library, the schools, and just several organizations, the Waxhaw Community Theater. Waxhaw has a writers committee. Who knew? So they were interested too. So yeah, we have probably 10 or 12 different organizations that'll be working with us.
That's awesome. Well, I'll go ahead, and I know I'm probably speaking before I get my blessings, but I'd like to figure out how I can help you.
Sure.
That sounds like something I would just truly enjoy. I love history. I love military history. And this area is so rich in colonial history to modern history, and just what rich heritage can be brought, and maybe even some of how to emphasize that. And I'd like to loop back into maybe another planning initiative, how to better partner with our economic team, and how we can better plan in preparation for the economic goals that we need. And so those are just a couple of things that I would love to see possibly discussed from my point of view, but I'd like to raise my hand and help you however I could with the celebration of 250 years of this great country.
Yeah, and I'll go with a broad stroke for this. So maybe the goal would be greater coordination with the town of Waxhaw advisory boards or other committees. So for example, our Downtown Waxhaw Association, they have multiple committees. They themselves have their own board. They have a design committee. They have I think the Promotions and Economic Vitality Committee have been combined. So that's a method that they use as a nonprofit for our downtown to further promote downtown as a regional destination. So, so again, broad strokes, right? So better coordination with town of Waxhaw committees and advisory boards. And that could be where you guys just sit in on other meetings, or you assign a planning board member to go to these other meetings. Because when I say we don't fall short of committees. I mean, yeah. Parks and Rec has one. They have a public art committee. So I think that would be a great goal to start coordinating that.
Well, I'd love to work with you all and be happy to join. I would like to double check though, because I know we're still waiting on our rules of procedure. Cindy and Barbie, you might have to follow back up with me. During the review, I believe our current rules of procedures do preclude me from holding an additional seat as of right now, so I couldn't sit on like a Parks and Rec seat. So I might have to be going, as you said, as an appointee to sit with the committee on the planning, but I might want to double check that one if you would, and maybe just loop back with me later. I believe I am prohibited from holding in an additional advisory board seat, like a Parks and Rec or something like that. I'm not sure. Thank you for checking that. Outside of that, I appreciate the discussion. I know I kind of, Rick?
Chair Ferris.
I apologize. I thank you. I didn't see your hand.
Oh, no, I just put it up.
Give me 1 second, Barbie.
The current rules of procedure do not preclude you from serving on another board.
Thank you for double checking.
You're welcome.
Rick, thank you.
First of all, I love the idea of partnering with the economic development bodies. I'm not sure if they're committees or jurisdictions of different departments within staff, but I think that's a great idea. I would really support a strategic objective that looks for constructive ways to get involved with that. So I just second that. Can you remind me, in the coming year, this is a one-year horizon, is that right? The strategic plan is a 1 year that you're looking for input on, a 1 year horizon, or?
Yeah, this is typically, typically it's done January 2025, or each year in January.
Right.
So it would be just for a 1 year,
Okay.
and then we reevaluate it typically every year.
So when is the next cycle for the comprehensive plan update or the land use?
Yeah, it's
plan?
typically every 3 to 5 years, and we're about a year and a half into the adoption of our comp plan.
Okay, so probably not a.
About another year,
So that's
year and a
probably
half.
doesn't make the cut for 2020, for the next year, probably not a big priority to get ourselves embedded in that process yet. I'm just thinking out loud. I would personally like to see somehow a goal to increase the way in which the planning board serves to gather and analyze and concentrate and apply feedback from the community. I know that's within our remit, according to the rules of procedures, that we conduct research, that we are bringing that in. And right now, I don't see a lot of places where that happens for us. So I'm wondering if that's an area that might be fleshed out in the next 12 months. So just one thought.
Yeah, so would you want to go out into the community to receive the feedback and then come back with a report to really, I guess, implement what the community is seeing? What are you envisioning, like more specifically?
It sounds like you have a thought, Daniel.
Because planning and zoning is such a broad topic, right? So you could be getting feedback on a specific development, right? So that's one big key factor of what you guys do. It could be anything for zoning and future land use. It could be anything in coordination with the county and joint planning areas. It could be coordinating with engineering and traffic and, other pedestrian improvements or like what you want downtown to look like. I mean, it's,
I think
parks, recs, and trails, and
all of that's good stuff.
Yeah.
What I was really looking at is more of the infrastructure for being able to be whatever the opposite of a megaphone is, a collector of input, so that we can apply that, improving knowledge about what the citizen concerns and priorities are. In our recommendations to the Board of Commissioners, and maybe that's only done through our suggestions as to how to change the land use plan and the comprehensive plan when that comes around every 5 years, or maybe there's another way. Go ahead. It looks like you've got a thought.
I'm going to jump in here, and I think I can address this in a nutshell. What Rick's trying to ask for. When we did our 2040 comp plan, we did several public input sessions. And I think he's just saying, what is the mechanism to essentially, maybe in advance or let's call it a public input memo, and not something as comprehensive as what we did in the past when gearing up for all those public input sessions and for the 2040 comp plan. So he's wondering if there's a mechanism to make like an input memo for the planning board and being able to make sure that the public knows that we're open and engaged and we're hearing and we're willing to receive any input in the planning process. But I would also like to emphasize that too, to anybody in the public that has any questions in the planning process. I know us as the planning board, the Board of Commissioners, and I would like to thank the staff because they're always available. If the public does have questions, I know staff, and I'll even make myself available to help to the best of my ability if they have questions out there in our long-term goals. But as you were trying to essentially be a receiver of input, and then that's normally, I believe the mechanism was done with essentially a public input session where we put out our maps and lay out, hey, where do you guys want trails? Where do you guys want this? Blair,
So
I remember being very
actually,
active with Blair on something like that.
The town actually does that at like Kaleidoscope, and some of it's the engineering, James Kelly's there, and Chancellor Wizard. He had a whole display at the town booth. And so that's done all throughout the year. Treasures, there's a lot of opportunity to engage with the public, and everybody, I say everybody, a lot of people give their input to the safety concerns on whether it's bikes, roads, whatever. So that there's a database there. I think you may be looking for access to that database or just knowledge that that database exists and then have access to it. So I think the town does do a really good job of there's surveys that get sent out. There was a survey that was sent out, or there's access to a survey that was at the town booth at the Kaleidoscope Festival. So stuff like that, there's data coming in. You just need access to that data. I don't want to speak for you. I'm asking the question.
Right. I like both of your ideas, neither of which was what I was trying to say. So I think those are in addition. I think what I'm fumbling around for is how to make where the planning board can add value on behalf of citizens for the Board of Commissioners. So if our role is to be making recommendations to the Board of Commissioners with regard to the direction of development ordinances and zoning, and we're basing that on being a little bit closer to citizen feedback than they might be. What are the mechanisms that we're building? What processes are we putting in place? Is it a memo? Maybe the memo that you described, Chairman Ferris, kind of gets at that. And we would have to develop our own internal process for how we come together and decide what goes into that memo. But for the planning board to be able to serve in a more explicit role to connect citizen feedback and concerns into the process that's downstream from us.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm going to paint in a broad stroke here. So it sounds like being a steward of the community by applying input or feedback from citizens to the function of the planning board, which then in turn goes to the Board of Commissioners via recommendation or just an idea to bring forward. Because I kept hearing the public input, and like when we have something coming up, that's what we utilize that for. So I think you're using that as an example, as a tool of what we use to get feedback from the community. I think again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rick, here. I think it's about, you want to be a steward in the community to where you're actually getting ground level feedback and not just, and I'll be blunt with this too. When we have a development come in, we only hear the feedback of those immediately adjacent. We don't hear feedback from those who may live 3 miles away. So I think
that's a really great point. There's sort of a
forgive me.
Yeah, go ahead.
Forgive me for interrupting. I think he's kind of referring to like an ETG, or what is it when you're getting input from your outer territories? Your
extraterrestrial jurisdiction. Territorial. Yeah, whatever
that acronym it boils down to. But
terrestrial.
And so how do we essentially? and forgive me, I am just trying to sum this up here so we can keep going this evening. But it sounds like we need to hash this out a little more in a more of a thoughtful way. And so for the sake of time and timeliness, I'm going to jump in and say, I think this is a great conversation. It sounds like he's referring to how to get our out of territory information accounted and weighted. And I know that there is some processes, again, going back to those public input sessions. And so it sounds like that's a longer form conversation. Let's pull off to the side. We'll talk to staff. But for this evening, if you don't mind, I'd like to go ahead and keep moving forward, and let's keep you and I talking on that. With that, though, does anybody else have any comments?
The specifics.
And then do you have any other points outside of this one?
I'm good.
Thank you. Any of my other planning members?
I would be interested in planning speaker series if somebody who like something similar to our scale of town and having similar growth issues, or so I would be interested in something like that.
Okay.
We had
Yes.
some kind of presentation, I think, year back. So I would be interested in something.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's something we can look into too, because there's subject matter experts who work for other jurisdictions or have experience with small towns like us who are growing substantially.
And that gives us like fresher ideas, or somebody already had solved some problems for us, like, so we can just get some information on that.
Yeah, and I'll point out too, in this we have champions, and I again was very broad with planning staff and planning board members. You guys are more than welcome to assign a specific planning board member to spearhead something. So for example, if Trey Taylor likes reading state law, then Trey could be our legislative liaison for the planning board. And if Rick wants to work with community members to really disseminate accurate information or to really hear what the concern is, that could be Rick's role. And then if Daniel, you have something of interest that you're specific, like you really like public art, so you want to join our public art committee, right? There are things that each individual person could be a champion. It doesn't have to be something that the whole board takes on, because you guys are a working board. You are representative of the community, and you may hear things that we don't necessarily hear, either by conversations with your neighbors or with your HOA or whoever it may be. So I want to just keep that in mind. Again, as you're thinking of ideas, we don't need anything super specific here. Just in advance of the next planning board meeting for Daniel to be able to go to the Board of Commissioners.
Looking forward to y'all giving me some good stuff. With that, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion to adjourn this evening's work session and adjourn this meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Without objection, all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye.